In today's show, Chauncey Billups weighs in on the Blazers roster and the value of vets. Plus, how far away are we from NBA expansion? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? Is your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making the show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, want to talk, it's a classic smorgasbord, a little smorgasbord for you. We're talking about a variety of topics. Chauncey Billups was on Rasheed Wallace's podcast and weighed in on the value of vets and shared a funny opinion about the Malcolm Brogdon trade. So we'll talk about in segment number one. Segment number two, Adam Silver. He addressed the media after following the NBA Board of Governors meeting on Tuesday and made it sound like NBA expansion might be further away than maybe you hoped, particularly if you live in Las Vegas or Seattle. And finally, we'll close the show talking the best Blazers lineups. I got ideas for 4 different Blazers lineups they could try it out with a variety of personnel, assuming that things remain the same. A little bit of fun to close the show. Let's start with Chauncey Billups. He was on the Sheed and Tyler show, the podcast hosted by Rasheed Wallace. It's filmed right there in Las Vegas. Live, it was filmed right there in Las Vegas, live in the studio. They stream live on YouTube. They churn it out. It seems like Rasheed Wallace works hard. I feel like Rasheed, maybe the content doesn't require as like heavy production, but like they're churning out shows. Shout out to Sheed. Bonzi Wells is on the program as well, and they talk a bunch of stuff. They spend a lot of time in the program, and I'll link to it in the comments below. They spend a lot of time in the program talking about the 0-4 Pistons and how they would like beat all these championship teams as if the 0-5 Pistons didn't exist. But Chauncey Billups was a guest on the program. Him and Rasheed Wallace, of course, were on the 2004 championship Pistons together, a fraternity bonded in gold, cast in gold by the Larry O'Brien Trophy. And Billups, they ask him questions about coaching a young team and all these things. And I think he had a couple really interesting comments. I'll share the funny one with you first. And I think there's one that's like a little more pertinent to like the actual roster, some sort of basketball team building stuff. But he was asked about trading Malcolm Brogdon. And he said he was really happy for Brogdon because, Brogdon was in a tough spot last year because Billups called him the best point guard on the roster, which I think it's telling because at one point in December, Chauncey Billups called Anthony Simons the team's best player. And now we're in July and he's calling Malcolm Brogdon the team's best point guard. Maybe these are harmless compliments, but it's certainly something that I noticed. He says he's happy for Malcolm Brogdon because he was too good to sit behind the kids, right? Like it was unfair to him to bring them behind the bench, behind young guards when he was the best point guard on the roster. So he was happy for Malcolm Brogdon, happy that he got an opportunity. Dog, what? They traded Malcolm Brogdon to the Wizards. They didn't give him a wonderful opportunity. They traded him to one of the worst organizations in the league. One of the few places you could argue is in a specifically worse spot than the Blazers. Like I think the Wizards are very, very specifically in a worse spot than the Blazers. What? So that was pretty funny. I mean, I wouldn't read too much into that Billups comment. I think he was trying to say like, we had to do right by Malcolm. We had to get Malcolm out of that situation, and I'm glad he gets a chance. Maybe he'll get another opportunity somewhere. But he said he's getting an opportunity to start and maybe get paid again because he's still in his prime and he could help a team. Help the Wizards do what exactly? He's going to end up behind Bub Carrington. Is the dude even younger than Scoot? They sent him to the exact same situation, only worse. Maybe Malcolm likes DC. I believe he's from the general region. I don't know exactly where he grew up, but I think he's actually from the DC area. So maybe home, maybe back to the crib. A funny comment. And they talked a bunch of sort of the way that podcast interviews go. They mentioned Chauncey Billups' golf game. He shot an 82 that day. They talked about Cafe Du Barry, a classic Blazers breakfast haunt on McAdam there in Southwest Portland. That actually might be what we call South Portland now, but it'll always be Southwest to me. Yeah, if you've been around Portland over the last 25 years and you've been to Cafe Du Barry, you've probably seen a Trailblazer. You've probably seen Nate McMillan or Steve Blake or Earl Watson or apparently Rasheed Wallace. They talk about the steak and eggs. It's the money steak and egg spot, and Chauncey Billups says he goes there too, Cafe Du Barry. I guess you're getting free promo. If you want to sponsor the podcast, I'd be happy to have you. But then they kind of got into more... maybe some more basketball stuff. There was a couple interesting things they discussed that I think really speak to Billups' place on the team. I want to note this. Players typically like Chauncey Billups. Malcolm Brogdon, for one, in public interviews, including one in The Athletic, where he was talking about how he wanted to remain in Portland, he's profusively complimentary of Billups. And I think for the most part, when you talk to players, they like Chauncey Billups as a person. I always think like some young guys like their coach because they don't know anything different. But when vets like Malcolm Brogdon, who's bounced around, continually says nice things about the coach when he doesn't necessarily have to, he could say B+ things as opposed to A+ things. I think it speaks to, people like Chauncey Billups for sure. But they're asking kind of about his style of coaching. And one of the things he says is that he has to be an emotional leader. He has to be up and yelling and getting guys going. He sort of has to take on the role of both a veteran and a coach in a way that he wouldn't in another roster, because otherwise he can't have babies raising babies. And this reminds me of a point when earlier this season, or earlier last season, I guess we've turned the page, when Billups was famously said that he got a bunch of cool guys on the roster. And one of the reasons they start slow is because they got too many cool guys. And it seemed like a direct shot at Anthony Simons and Jeremy Grant. Too many cool guys in the starting lineup. I think this speaks to what Billups wishes he had on the roster, and that is like a true sort of like emotional core vocal leader. I think Jeremy Grant is well respected. I think he's the kind of guy who probably quote unquote leads by example, but leading by example is not leading. It's setting an example. I think those are different things. I feel that strongly. Anthony Simons has become more vocal as he's gotten older, but he's just not that. It's not his personality. He's not the command the room, here's what we're going to do, everyone listen up type of personality. Those are good vets. They're not going to poison the well, but they're not like the sort of like rah emotional core leaders. And I think Billups misses that on this roster. He went on to talk about it like, he not only said babies raising babies, but he said that it's that his role and the way he sort of has to have that emotional center and get guys going. So he's like, he can't be too hard on them because he has to get them up and get them going, get them pumped up to play and all those things. It's like, he says, not the norm in the league. You don't see coaches do that the way he has to. And I think, again, he's speaking to the roster and a deficiency that he views in the roster. He's also talked about how because they lost so many games and because they were so young and struggled so much, like he had to start finding sort of the beauty in little things, the beauty in little wins. And some of that was like when he could pour into a guy and see it pay off immediately. Some of that is the rah-rah stuff that he's doing on the sidelines. He's doing that because it allows him to get a small win each day. But then he lamented something, that the league has gotten a lot younger. And one of the panelists there, I don't know his name, but one of the panelists there was talking about, it was not Bonzi Wells or Tyler or Rasheed Wallace, but it was the other guest, a coach from the Detroit area, who was talking about how, like, NBA teams have gotten a lot younger and maybe they should, use some of these spots for younger guys. And Billups corrected him and was like, you can't use two-way contracts on young guys. Like those are de facto, or on veterans. Like those are de facto, like young player contracts. When Billups said what you need to do is roster spots 14 and 15, maybe they should be vets. And he mentioned Udonis Haslem in Miami. And I really think this is something that Billups feels to his core. And I think he thinks it specifically about the team he coaches. They are missing the sort of veteran, institutional knowledge, old head NBA dude on the team that could help and guide a young roster. I think he truly believes that. I think listening to this interview, it's like he was lamenting not having like that person. But I also think what Billups was saying, and I think it's something I've mentioned here in the podcast as well, is like that dude doesn't necessarily need to be someone who plays. I'm thinking like when the Blazers pivoted post LaMarcus Aldridge and they tried to go young and then they won 44 games in a playoff series and it was like, whoops. And then they decided to pay every single person on that team in the summer of 2016 and kind of torpedoed a good chunk of Dame's career. But like they kept Chris Kaman around and they were very clear with Chris Kaman, like, you're not going to play, dude. And Chris Kaman got into pretty bad shape because he knew he wasn't going to play. And eventually they needed him late in the season because of injuries and stuff. But like they had someone who was like an old head in the locker room who'd been in the league, been an all-star in the league, been, someone who could provide wisdom and institutional knowledge about how it works, how to treat people, how the NBA rhythm works, how to take care of yourself, what you need to do, and didn't need to be on the ball and take 20 shots in order to do that. Didn't need to set example by taking, by taking jump shots, field goal attempts when the game starts. Could just like do it behind the scenes in the locker room. That value, that veteran presence on the end of the bench. That's why I mentioned Udonis Haslem. Why Billups mentioned Udonis Haslem. I do think if the Blazers do end up making trades and they do end up trading their older players, and then they're not very old right now. They just don't have, after trading Malcolm Brogdon, it's basically just Jeremy Grant in terms of like guys who you would consider old. Everyone else is like not yet 28. But like if they do pivot off Anthony Simons, they do pivot off Jeremy Grant and they're prioritizing some things. I think prioritizing and I've mentioned this name in the past, and I believe he's re-signed with the Rockets, and like the dream is dead. But a player like Jeff Green, 38 years old, been in the league for a long time, just like knows that those players are dwindling, and I think Billups knows it. But if the Blazers were to prioritize a veteran presence, I think Billups would prefer like truly old head veteran presence, like a true gray beard in the locker room to like show guys what's up and not have to could comfortably be behind the scenes and not need to soak up minutes in order to be like that veteran presence. I think Billups has strong preferences about what the roster would look like and is kind of dealing with the reality of what it does look like. And I don't think he was mad or bitter or anything, and I don't mean to paint him as such, but I thought it was interesting commentary. And again, I'll link that podcast below. Shout out to Rasheed Wallace, Carolina legend. One other fun thing for Billups from Summer League is he was on the broadcast. He was talking with Jared Greenberg and Jamal Crawford on one of the games. I believe it was the second game against Philly. And at the very end of the interview, Billups kind of talks and all these things, and the interview about all these things. And at the end of the interview, Jared Greenberg says, "Hey, keep your day job." And what he's saying is like, "You're really good on TV. Don't come take my job." And Billups is like, "Dude, I'm gonna try." Like you're making that joke just like the coach probably most likely to get fired in the NBA this season. Oh no. I think it was lighthearted, but it was extremely funny to me. I guess it's not funny when people lose their jobs. That's mean, but I found it humorous. I can't lie. Okay, let's shift gears. The Smorgasbord episode is in effect. Let's talk NBA expansion and what that means for the Blazers and the people who own the franchise. Join me in that second segment, won't ya? First, though, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Gametime. It's the place for last-minute tickets. You can get up to 60% off face value when you wait. If you're a procrastinator or you're just someone who decides to have fun at the last minute, well, Gametime is the app for you. They got deals on not just sporting events, but at concerts and comedy shows and everything. Gametime's got it all. But if you're in Portland this weekend and say, I don't know what I'm going to do, we'll kind of feel it out, well, you can go see the Thorns play Tijuana from the Mexican League. That's the National Women's Soccer League here. The Thorns kind of struggled at the beginning of the year. They're back, baby, and you can see them this Sunday. Get in price $32. You can buy fancier tickets and pay a whole bunch more money. But if you want to get in cheap, Gametime's going to make it cheap. And if you're a procrastinator, Gametime has tickets that get cheaper as you get closer to kickoff and even deals after the match has started. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download Gametime today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA and get $20 off your first purchase. Again, super simple. Download the app, sign up for an account, create an account, and then use the redemption code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Get $20 off your first purchase. It's Gametime. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right. As we shift gears a little bit, on Tuesday in Vegas, following the Board of Governors meeting, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver spoke to the media in his annual Vegas press conference. He addressed a number of things, including the new CBA and sort of the burden that's put on some teams and the incredible confusion it offers to fans because you need a legal degree to really be able to understand it. Shout out to my people who crushed contracts in L2. I don't know when you take that. I know nothing about law school, but I wanted to pretend I did. But what he talked about at length, and I this is available on video, and you know what? Since I'm in a linking mood, I will link the video, the press conference with Adam Silver in the episode description for this episode, so you can watch it all. You can watch the Sheed podcast, you could watch the Adam Silver press conference, you could get a feel for all of it. But what he talked about at length was the NBA's media deal, which is like not quite finalized, but it's done. And by that, I mean that they've agreed to an 11-year, $76 billion media rights deal that will keep the NBA Finals on ESPN. Part of it will go to Amazon and part of it will go to NBC, and how that all shakes out will be decided in the future. But in like the immediate term, that's a done deal, except that what they're holding out is that if Warner Brothers Discovery, basically TNT, if the Turner family of products want to match that offer, the NBA is going to give them, some time to match that offer, and TNT is pretending like they've got the money there and they're just deciding whether they're going to match it. No one thinks they're going to match it. No one who covers this stuff thinks that TNT is going to get back in the game. They think it's a done deal, but there's like a window for, I guess, it to happen and for things to be a surprise. And most likely the direction things are headed is ESPN, NBC, and Amazon split across those things. If you ask James Dolan in New York what this means, is that they're killing regional sports networks. Guess what, James? Those are already dead. Sorry about Madison. Sorry about MSG Network. Sorry about the whole Madison Square Garden family of products. I'm sure it's hurting. So once they get the media rights deal, this is why it matters for the Blazers. One of the dominoes for the media rights deal was like, once that was decided, once there was $76 billion coming in over the course of 11 years, that's going to up the valuation of some of the franchises, and the Blazers, who are in a sort of permanent flux ownership state where the ownership group has to sell the team, but the timeline for when they have to sell it isn't totally clear. It seemed like it was going to take 5 years. Now we're pushing up almost 6 full years since Paul Allen passed away, and a couple years ago, the estate released a statement saying, "Oh, it could take a decade. Like it could take forever." Basically saying like, we'll sell. We're not going to sell now, but we'll sell. And some of the speculation and much of it here on this podcast was like, well, the media rights deal is going to be a big thing. That's going to be step one, because once they get a new media deal, once they're getting $76 billion on the books, and you have that revenue coming in, and there's comfort with that revenue and all those things, like then the valuation of franchises will stabilize or continue to rise or whatever it is. But you'll wait for that information to sell. Okay, step one. Step two is potential expansion. Because while expanding would dilute that media rights deal, right? $76 billion is an agreement. If there was more teams, the pie would just have more pieces in it, right? But there's also expansion fees. You got to pay ownership. You pay the existing owners to buy into the league. And as I understand it, at least currently, those expansion fees are not part of basketball related income. So they go just to the owners and not to the players, which is something. But I guess that's why you have a collective bargaining agreement. Gotta collectively bargain for it. So, what I took from the Adam Silver press conference was that we're not that close to expansion. The media deal is going to be done, soon enough, maybe in the next month. But Adam Silver said that, quote, "We will engage this fall in the process of making those determinations." In the earnest process. Engage this fall in the earnest process of making those determinations. So basically, like, we're not going to discuss that this summer. It's not something that came up at this year's Board of Governors meetings. When we reconvene in the fall and have another one of these things, maybe we'll talk about it, and then we'll get going. The speculation and the reporting, the sort of secret and out in the open known stuff, is that Vegas and Seattle are the front runners to earn expansion teams. And to me, it doesn't sound like they could get a team before the earliest, based on these comments, the earliest, we're talking 2027 and likely beyond. If they're tabling this till the fall, finalizing the media deal and then discussing it, this doesn't seem like an urgent thing or something that's coming up. And I feel two ways about that. One, the people of Seattle deserve an NBA team. It's whack what the league and Howard Schultz and Clay Bennett did to them. But if the people who own the Blazers are holding out, if the Allen estate is holding out until there's expansion and they can get the fees from an expansion team, they might just own the team for a little bit longer. I think in general, the Allen estate has not been like a terrible negative that some people paint it as. They hustled to put a G League team together. They've kind of held on to money and been they could have just like shed salary more aggressively, and they've been more responsible with, they gave Jeremy Grant $160 million. Whether that was a good idea or not, like they didn't poo-poo a big contract that the Blazers kind of needed to retain because of the bird rights sunk costs problem. They've spent money. They've allowed the Blazers to retool a coaching staff. I kind of think the biggest problem with them is that they haven't been made decisive firm actions. They've kind of seemed like 1 foot in, 1 foot out sometimes. And maybe if you think like Chauncey Billups just should have been fired, you could say that's a problem with the coaching staff, with the ownership, right? But for me, I don't think that this terrible negative. But I do think in general, having a ownership group that is eventually going to sell and it is not an advantage. And what you want is a person that is committed, fully bought in, and an advantage, not like a neutral party. A neutral is doesn't do you anything. You can't buy your way out of to success like you could back in the day in the NBA, but you can do little things to make the team better. The Allen estate has committed to renovations to the Moda Center over the next couple summers. They're spending money on the team. It's not cheap. It's just kind of wishy-washy lack of direct action. So it might mean that this, I know some people view the ownership as the biggest problem, and I don't hold that opinion, but I don't think it's a crazy opinion. I respect your right to hold that opinion. I just think in general, if you were saying what's the logical time for them to sell, if it ain't the media rights thing that triggers it, if it isn't this, when this gets finalized the next couple weeks and we hear some movement on it over the next, say 12 months, I think it could be longer and it could be waiting for expansion, and the Allen estate might just own this team they might have been right when they said 10 years. They might just hold it for as long as they want it, because it seems like the will stipulates you have to sell it and you can't hold on to it. But if you're still sorting things out, how much is this thing worth? And expansion could be part of the calculation for how much this thing is worth. And plus it's a giant estate. There's a lot to calculate. It might just hang around for a little while. Also of note, who went to the Board of Governors meeting for the Blazers? It was Burkhold. That's who's there representing the ownership group. Just put that feather in your cap for when you're thinking about how things work on down the line. Okay, to close the show, I want to talk about the best Blazers lineups in a variety of categories. Join me in that third segment, won't ya? Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Let's talk Blazers' best lineups. I'm not doing my disappearing lineup trick. I'll save that for when we get to training camp. It's a lineup that I like, that I can magically make disappear, that won't play together very much this season. I'm running on 4 consecutive years of nailing it. Nobody can make a lineup disappear like me. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just talking about fun lineups. I was thinking watching Summer League with Donovan Clingan out there and Deni Avdija and Scoot Henderson and Toumani Camara watching on the bench or watching on the sidelines, along with Jabari Walker and Delano Banton and Shane Sharp. It's the Blazers they got a full boat. They got 15 players on the roster. They got 2 two-way deals. It seems like transactions are slowing a little bit in the NBA. We'll probably talk about that next week. This might be what they look like. And when I'm looking over at the sidelines, DeAndre Ayton back in the building, Rob Williams was there in Summer League. The whole NBA goes to the first weekend of Summer League. If you get a chance, go with them, because the whole dang league converges. Every media, many media members, I was going to say every, but your boy wasn't there, but I don't really count. Every media member of note and every, and every player seemingly that has any interest in being there is going to be there. And I was thinking, like, what is the Blazers kind of like, what are some different combos they could put out? Like, if this roster is indeed finished, if they don't do anything else, what are some combos they could put out there that would be intriguing? So I have 4 lineups for you that I'm going to share with you that I think are intriguing groups. I tried to make them logical, and I'll try to explain my logic as we go through it. Let's start with the best shooting lineup. The Blazers were one of the worst shooting teams in the league last year. Depending on how you slice it, they were somewhere between the worst and the 3rd worst shooting team in the NBA last season from 3. Needless to say, bad. So what's the best? And they lost Malcolm Brogdon, who was their best just raw shooting percentage, best 3-point shooter, and replaced him with Deni Avdija, who is maybe a pretty good shooter, but has had one good season. So it's kind of hard to know if that's going to translate. If it does, awesome. But if it doesn't, like, his career averages suggest that he's probably not that good of a shooter. If last year is real, they got a shooter, baby. So the best shooting lineup they could put out there. Well, guess what? It includes Deni because they're going to have to believe. For me, it's Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, Deni Avdija, Jeremy Grant, and Duop Reath. This isn't that far away from like what I believe if the team rolls out like is going to look like they're just one of their best lineups, period. Best lineups often in the modern NBA means best shooting lineup, but DeAndre Ayton is an excellent catch and shoot guy. He's an excellent mid-range jump shooter, but he doesn't shoot threes. Duop Reath had a brief period where he was crushing it, shooting 38% from 3 on volume for a little bit, kind of slowed down at the end of the year. But he's the Blaze. If they play a stretchy big man, he's their stretchy big man. Jeremy Grant's a 40% 3-point shooter in a Blazers uniform, has been each of the last 2 seasons, although his 3-point rate declined a little bit. Deni Avdija crushed it from the corners on low volume, but 48% from 3 from the corners, like a really good shooter. Anthony Simons is a very good shooter in the NBA, can shoot off the bounce, is a really good catch and shoot guy. I think in the right role, he could even be better than he has been. I don't know if the Blazers can offer him that role. And then I didn't know what to do with that last spot. I gave it to Shaedon Sharpe. His shooting hasn't really caught up with the aesthetics of his jump shot. His jump shot is beautiful. That thing is beautiful. It doesn't go in at the level of his aesthetics. It is, but I think he's capable of being that, and I think that's your group. Ant, Shea, Deni, JG, and Duop. That's your best shooting lineup. What's your best defensive lineup? This is one I really like because I was trying to think outside the bun. We're gonna have Deni Avdija is going to have a lot of responsibility on this lineup. He's going to have a lot of responsibility in this lineup. I'm going best defensive group. Matisse Thybulle, Chris Murray, Toumani Camara, Deni Avdija, and Donovan Clingan. Not a lot of shooting, not a lot of dribbling. Deni, you're going to have to save them, but I think that's your best defensive lineup. Matisse Thybulle, Chris Murray, Toumani Camara, Deni Avdija, and Clingan. Here's what I'll say about Clingan. He definitely has the best defensive potential on the team. If Robert Williams is healthy, he is a significantly better defender in October of 2024 than Donovan Clingan's going to be. I don't think that's controversial. Young guys typically struggle. I will say, shout out to listener Todd who pointed this out first to me. A couple other listeners have pointed out as well, is that Clingan's only fouling. He's committing less than 3 fouls a game in 25 minutes in Summer League. He's blocking more than 4 shots a game. He's leading the Summer League in rebounds, and he's not fouling like so many young big men do. He's been really impressive on that end. He's been legitimately very his defense has been really impressive. I'm not 100% sure night one, day one, that Clingan is a better defender than DeAndre Ayton in the NBA, right? Because it's just going to take him a little while to figure out everybody's tendencies and the patterns and the speed and all of that. But I think it'll happen quickly for him because I think he'll be impactful in a hurry. So I would be comfortable saying Matisse Thybulle, Chris Murray, Toumani Camara, Deni Avdija, Rob Williams. If Rob Williams is healthy, I think that's your best defensive lineup. I would be comfortable saying replacing Clingan with DA, but I think Clingan has the highest upside defensively, and I'm kind of thinking like logic for like how do you put like your young guys who are part of the future plan and also do this type of thing. But I think that lineup is a little fraught, at least at the center spot. And there's like not enough dudes who can like literally just like dribble the ball across half court. So that could be a problem. What's the fastest lineup they could play? The Blazers have been screaming about, we're going to play fast. Well, Scoot Anderson. I think it's Anthony Simons, Toumani Camara, Deni Avdija, and then at center at like the other big, Jeremy Grant. You could pick who plays center between Deni and JG. I would be comfortable replacing Jeremy Grant with Shaedon Sharpe. Shaedon is capable of playing fast, but he doesn't play fast with the ball. Anthony Simon's much faster with the ball, so that's why I have him replaced there. But like filling the lanes, I think Shaedon Sharpe flies. But it's just like I wanted to make this somewhat realistic, and like 3 guards, 2 money, and Deni doesn't seem like. I mean, the lineup doesn't make that much sense, anyways. But like, it's like, okay, you're gonna play all wings. You have your most physical defenders out there still. You can kind of get away with it. This group maybe plays like 3.5 minutes, one random third quarter, and you try to just run as much as you can. Grant doesn't move quickly without the ball. He's capable of playing in transition, but really hasn't in Portland. So I'm totally comfortable swapping out Shaedon Sharpe for Jeremy Grant there. Like that's fine with me. And then what's the Blazers' best lineup? What's their best lineup? It's Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, Deni Avdija, Jeremy Grant, and DeAndre Ayton. When things start in the fall, I think that's the best 5 players you could put out on the floor. That also makes sense. Like those are your best 5 players. That also makes sense. I'm not sure that group starts because I think the team might prioritize Scoot starting, but Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, Deni Avdija, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton. Here's a fun thing doing this exercise as I went through this, and this is kind of just like my own penciling it out. I use a pen, to be clear, but penciling it out. Deni Avdija is in all my lineups. All of them. He's in the best shooting lineup, the best defensive lineup, the fastest lineup, and the best overall lineup. There's a lot on him to be really good. He's got a lot. He answers so many questions. Secondary playmaking, another dude who can handle the ball, another dude who can potentially shoot, another really good wing defender. Almost every sort of like, hey, they could use some help in this area. Deni seems to fill in that bubble in some ways. The best version of Deni is really going to unlock what this team can be. So let's hope we see the best version of him because he, just doing this little exercise, boy, does he seem like the guy who kind of makes it all work. All right, that is going to do it for today's program. Tomorrow's program is going to be a fun one. Casey Holdall of Trailblazers.com is going to join the show. We're going to talk all things Summer League and the Trailblazers from someone who was in the building all week long. Don't miss that one. Tell your friends about the program. Tell them they get it wherever they get podcasts and also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.